Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today is a very special guest, Dave Ashworth. Dave is a business owner. He's a co-founder of Quantify for over a decade, and he's also the founding member and what they call it, chair of Provisors from South Central Pennsylvania, Harrisburg one. Dave, pleasure to talk to you today. How you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
I understand this is not your first rodeo into podcasting. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with podcasting?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been guest on a bunch of different ones. I was thinking back through it the other day and I even forgot about some. I was like, "Oh yeah, I did do that one, which is cool." I've had a couple on my own. One was more like accounting, entrepreneurship related. Haven't done as much with that recently. And then the other one is nothing business related. I'm a big outdoorsman hunter, so it was more in that realm. And that one was a lot of fun. So
Really, I wasn't aware that you were big into hunting and outdoors.
I am.
What are some cool hunts, or what do you prefer to go for? And
Yeah. Yeah, living in Pennsylvania, whitetail hunting is the thing around here usually. So a lot of whitetail and turkey hunting. Um, Trying to think of any I typically stay around here. I did hunt Illinois last year. Probably do a little more out of state hunting this year, talking about maybe Ohio, maybe up in New York. My parents have a cabin up north, but mostly here in Pennsylvania, and mainly a bow hunter. That's what I love to do. So if I'm not in the office doing this stuff, I'm usually out in the woods somewhere doing something. So,
shout out to a friend of mine, Reed Vanderveen. He is a fractional chief marketing officer out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
mm,
And he's got a very interesting POV on business because most, if not all, of his clientele is in the hunting related industries. So he's worked
nice.
with Second Amendment type businesses and hunting and all kinds of conservation.
Yeah,
So I love
that's cool.
I haven't gone hunting much at all, but I one of my bucket list to dos for this year is to go on my first one. And turns out a bunch of my friends are really big into it. So Dave, maybe you'll have a tag along with a newbie sometime later this year if I'm lucky enough.
Do it.
But
Let's do it,
um,
man. Yeah,
I do love
it's
hearing a good hunting story.
for sure. For sure.
What do you think hunting, if anything, has that complements and can get you lessons in terms of business? What are
It's
some
good.
analogies there?
Sure, it's a great question. I would say the one that comes to my head is just persistence. Uh, the reality is with at least for me, bow hunting, it's a challenge to get a particular animal within 30 yards. And there's a lot of time you spend outside where most of the time you're not gonna achieve your goal when you're out there. But it's about just being persistent and sticking to a plan and continuing to show up every day and work hard after that. Um, I think the other thing too is that, and I've been guilty of this in business and in hunting and other things in my life, is so focused on the actual end result. I want to shoot a particular animal, or I want to get my business to a certain revenue level or do a certain thing that we miss out on the whole journey to get there. And over the years, as I've gotten older, I've realized that journey is really what it's all about. The chase and the journey. And so building a business or the pursuit of an animal, like every piece of it is something that is to be enjoyed, not just the end result. And so I think there's a good correlation between, hunting in particular and life in general, but also running a business.
Yeah, they call it business, not printing money, and they call it hunting, not harvesting animals.
That's right.
The patience and persistence, you don't have
Right.
100% success, but if you don't have love for the game, you'll never have success, in my opinion.
100%.
That's cool. So I understand that you have a focus on serving nonprofits. Can you tell me a little bit more about why it is that you chose that niche and that clientele
Sure.
to serve?
Sure. So as most kind of businesses are, it started by chance, right? So we had our first ever client that was a nonprofit. Didn't know anything about it. Started to get into it and just really enjoyed working with it. They have very unique needs. We really enjoy just coming alongside them and helping them, you know, allowing them to push their mission forward and kind of handling the accounting and finance side for them so that they can do that. There's not, from a business strategy standpoint, there's not a ton of other companies that focus on the nonprofit space, so it is a little bit unique to kind of go into that niche. And then the service offering, like what they're needing, is also a little bit unique, but something that we're really confident in. So, this is something that's happened more recently for us. We've done the work in the nonprofit space for a long time, but more recently, I've really decided to shift focus almost exclusively on, in the nonprofit world.
It's always interesting hearing how business owners land on the ideal client profile or their target market. And it sounds like there's a balance between um, proven track record of past success and helping these clients, them being a good fit. But I also understand that where your heart and your character lies is that of service and of faith. And I know that your religion is pretty, a big part of your identity and what you're all about. So can you touch a little bit about how doing what you do in your professional career adds to your holistic 360-degree view of adding to your life and how that impacts your faith?
100%. Yeah. I would say the most important part of my life is my faith. I'm a follower of Jesus, and that's what drives pretty much everything else in my life. And so, taking those principles into business and how I live my life, it's a direct correlation with how we serve our clients, serving them well. Um, but then also, a lot of our nonprofit clients are Christian ministries, right? So those are ones that I enjoy working with. I understand what they're trying to do, and we have some amazing clients that aren't that, and we love serving them as well. Um, but certainly, my faith on a personal level, helps to drive, just the values in our business and how we do things, the type of clients that we want to work with. And when I say type of clients, it doesn't necessarily have to mean like a Christian ministry, but just the type of people that we work with. Our values and core values have to line up fairly well, or the relationship is not going to go great. And so, yeah, I think that's a big part of, like, any business and culture is going to be driven by whoever is leading that business and whatever their personal values are, whether that's um, consciously and someone's doing that or subconsciously. I feel like it's going to happen either way.
From a personal side, you know who you get along with and you know who you like, and you also can get a sense of who likes you and gets along with you. But from a branding side, it's really important to make sure that you don't sacrifice the brand integrity and your company's identity
Yeah.
by maybe serving somebody that would be out of line. I like to make the analogy when I talk about branding in terms of marketing, where it's more like a bouquet of flowers than it is like a cattle traditional seared brand. Sure, your logo matters, but it's the arrangement and the assortment of all of the different experiences that those who interact with your company have of you. And you just need one dandelion to make your dozen, roses look like junk.
True.
So it's great that you're conscious of that, as I suggest many other business owners should take the same approach. I know when we've had some discussions, Dave. I've had the pleasure to know you now for a couple of months, and you've gotten quite a few accomplishments. What are two to three that stick out to you that you really want to, you think have been very formative in your journey,
Business wise,
business or personal?
That's a good question. I mean, I would say the one that comes first, like business wise, is just launching the business. I worked in public accounting for 3 years, and I left to start my own business when I was 25, which was probably younger than most getting into this field. And it was really challenging for the first 3, 4 years, like just not making a lot of money, having a lot of clients, um, but just sticking to it and continuing to know that, like, hey, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I need to just keep sticking to it. Um, that's probably the one that stands out the most to me that I would say I'm most proud
Making the
of.
leap.
Making the leap and then not giving up.
Mm.
Because it would have been really easy just to give up. I had people tell me that I just was, you know, too young or just not ready for this, and people discouraging me like, hey, you have a great job in public accounting and, getting a good paycheck. You shouldn't leave and go and do your own thing and go to zero. Um, so just being a really a 25-year-old kid and going out on his own and having some of these things and sticking to it. Yeah, I would say that's the one that stands out the most, honestly.
Going back to the personal side of things, you've mentioned previously in the show that your faith and your relationship with Jesus is central to you. What was the timeline of that? Was it always that way for your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I grew up in a Christian home, so it was always kind of around me. But I never really made it my own until probably actually a similar timeline to starting my business, actually. I would have considered myself a Christian early on as a young kid. But through a series of things happening in my life and things that I was struggling with, and um I really didn't make that my own and my own faith and something that was mine until probably around that time, mid 20s probably, which I've never really actually thought about that timing, but having faith that this business is part of God's plan, um, that probably kept me going more than anything else, honestly.
When I talk to other business owners, oftentimes they look back on their career, and one of the things they say is, "Oh, I wish I would have bet on myself sooner. I wish I would have started sooner." And the idea of betting on yourself as if like it's a game of chance or there's like some sort of, binary conclusion where you win out or you don't. I like the idea of walking in faith a lot more,
Yeah.
where it's
Same.
like you're having faith not only in yourself, but in the greater picture of, the journey,
Yeah.
the God's plan, if you want to call it that. Because as someone that has faith, it's not certainty. It's the same thing with hunting. They don't call it harvesting. It's not like, oh, I'm
Right.
absolutely right. You have faith. The opposite of faith, I think, is certainty, right? Because faith has to be tested, just like how you were tested for your first 3 to 4 years in business.
Yep.
So I love hearing stories where it's not like, oh, I made my first million at X age, or I got this award at Y timeline. It's like,
Sure.
no, you got on the path and you stuck with the path. And I think
That's right. That's right.
it's a valuable perspective to keep. So it business is going well, and it must be because you've also now started your Provisors group. Do you want to touch a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, business has been good. We're coming up on in a month here, 13 years, which is nuts. But yeah, so there's a group that I launched. It's a national organization called Provisors. I was living down in Chester County for a while. They started launching in Philadelphia, and I was potentially going to join one of those. It's like a national networking group of professionals that are pretty seasoned. They typically 10 plus years in their field to join a group like this, invitation only. I moved to Central PA about a year and a half ago. And I was talking to them and I was like, hey, I'd really like to get into like a good networking organization, but I know there's nothing out here. Will you let me launch a group? Like there's plenty of opportunity out here, plenty of good professionals out here. And so we launched the group. in I guess October of 24. So we're fairly new. Um, but I really like the group. Ross, obviously, you're in the group. I really enjoy our group and the people in it. And I'm excited to see like what we could do together. Because I think it's a really, really solid group of people. And it's based in Harrisburg, so it's called the Harrisburg, chapter or group. But really, we're pulling from, you're I think in Lebanon, Lancaster, York, Mechanicsburg. I'm west, so I'm in like Carlisle area. So there's
Perry
there's
County,
quite
we
a
have a few members there.
Yep. Perry County, so up there. So really anything within an hour of Harrisburg, I would say is on the table.
And what are some of the types of professionals that we're looking for to join Provisors, and who does
Yep.
it make the most sense for?
Yeah, so some of the people in the group, obviously us too. We have someone in staffing, in IT. There's a pretty heavy attorney focus as well. So obviously attorneys, but any of those, banking, insurance, anybody in that like professional service realm that has that 10 years experience that's within that area. I mean, those are the type of people that we're looking for. And yeah, I've I'm not a big like networking type person in the traditional sense of like networking group stuff. But ever since I've been introduced to provisors, it's just felt different to me. There's opportunities to go to other groups and to get into different groups within provisors, and the peoples just seem to really want to help each other. But that's kind of a mix of the type of people that we're looking for, in our group.
One of the things about Provisor that stands out versus the traditional networking, business referral partnership, networks that I've been a part of throughout my career is that number one, you actually get time to get to know people. We have these things called troikas, which are basically like small group breakouts that you meet with, and I have probably made more connections of interesting folks in the last 90 days through that than I have in my several years of randomly going to happy hour mixers that are local events of just like, hey, here's my business card. Oh, can't
Right,
talk. Hey, here's my business card.
right.
So speaking from my own perspective, um, I'm appreciative and glad to be part of the provisors community in central Pennsylvania, not because of any selfish reason of, oh, it's helped my business grow by X% in 90 days. I'm not going to say that, but what I will say is it's helped me to reach out and connect with people and learn a ton about different interests, whether you're interested in
Yeah,
podcasting, whether you're interested in, mergers and acquisitions or whatever you're interested in. They have all types of groups. And I think there's like 10,000 members throughout the
yep,
nation that you can basically scroll through the Rolodex of providers and say, oh, hey, you have it goes from a you would never even be able to have something in common with this person or reach out to, hey, we're both improvisers. Like, what can I get some time in your calendar? And that's happened to me several times. So
yep. Same.
I say that to say anyone listening, I don't run ads on the show, but I do try to make some helpful business suggestions. So if you're someone like that around the area, please reach out to Dave or myself and we'll get you squared away. So
Yeah.
how does balancing the provisors um, group, because it's almost like a second small business for you, I would imagine. How does that work with your existing business? Do you find that, being in business for 13 years, you've gotten to the point where you're not the doer of 100% of the task and you have staff to help you? Is that one of the ways that you're able to do such a thing?
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I'm definitely more in a business development, operational role in the business, which is allows me to do more of this stuff. But I just look at provisors like, because I do a ton of one-on-one type stuff. I don't do a ton of like group stuff. So that's just another part. The provider is another part of my just business development and networking, and I just invest time in that. So it definitely is a time commitment to lead the group and to get everybody together and do a lot of different things to do that. But I'm just looking at it, really as an investment in our marketing, business development, and sales efforts, and just meeting people. Um, And it's yeah, I feel like it's been worth it for me so far. I've enjoyed it. And I think to your point, really with anything, like you're gonna get out of it what you put in, right? Like if you show up and you're engaged and you go to other groups and you're talking to people and you're looking at other members and who you can connect with, like you're gonna get stuff out of it. And I have, like I joined the nonprofit affinity group. I've met a ton of good people in there. I've gotten multiple referrals out of there already. Um, and I've gone to, I think, almost all of the Philadelphia meetings, and I met people in those and connected with the leaders there. And so, like, I've, it's sometimes it's like to talk about like provisors, but naturally, like relationships and things come out of that. So, really, it's, yeah, and I'm just a believer in this, like, whatever you put in, that's what you're going to get out. If you just show up to the meeting and leave and expect to get referrals, might not happen too much, but if you're really engaged and connecting with people one on one and going to other groups, like you're just naturally going to get more out of it, I believe.
One of the business books and personal development books that I have read in the last year or two that's been transformative and worth sharing and mentioning on a podcast is called The Go Giver.
Mm,
And it tells a fable of a someone who's successful and been there, and they're taking someone that has the ambition to be successful, and they go through a series of stories and scenarios where the moral of the story is the more that you give and add value to your network, the consequence, unintended, is that your net worth also grows. So, what's one thing, Dave, if you could boil it down to one thing that you try to do to be more of a go-giver to your network?
yeah.
What's an example of how you do it?
Um, Honestly, I think the biggest thing, and I can give a very practical thing too, but I think it just comes down to being genuine. Like, if I ask you, how can I help you? Right? Because I'm sure we've all been asked that. And I know I've been asked by people who like they don't really care what I'm gonna say, but they want to ask because they think I do. But like I just that genuine like caring for people. Um, I oftentimes like my like networking calls will go down like a personal connection path where it's like, hey, like what's going on in your personal life? Or and I've had some really cool conversations there, and I just like to connect with people and if there's something I can help with. But it really starts with being genuine. Like, do I really want to help people or not? Um, Practically, for me, connecting people with other people. I've been building a network for 13 years now. I know a ton of people. So as I'm listening to like what they're looking for, I can be thinking like, yeah, this would be a really good connection for you. Or if somebody asks, hey, do you know any people in this area? Like actually connecting them there. So just connecting people with other good people I think is just one pretty simple practical way just to give and finding like the key to that again is goes back to being genuine, like really listening to the person, like what they're looking for, what type of clients they're looking for, and then who would be a really good connection based on everything you heard, not just saying like, okay, Ross is in the marketing realm, he should talk to this person, right? Like, no, let me learn about Ross. Let me see what type of clients he likes to work with. Who do I think would be like he would get along well with? And let me connect him to that person. So I think the big picture being genuine, the practical step, connecting people.
I have had a couple compliments from clients or coworkers in the past, but when you're telling that story, one that happened to me recently, it stood out was, wow, Ross, it seems like when we have a problem, you always know a guy. You're
Hmm.
the I know a guy person. So
Yep.
you can connect us with someone that can help us solve our problem. And like you said, it really goes down to being intentional about one, putting your best foot out there as a genuine person and saying, here's who I really am. And some people will like it, and then that's great. You can add them to your network and mutual benefit. But even more importantly, sometimes you disqualify people that aren't a good fit. And as long as you have enough people in your I know a guy bucket
Mhm.
that help somebody else out, I mean, I haven't really thought of that as a high compliment until you said that that's one of your biggest ways of giving value. But I think everyone in 2025 should make it a personal goal to, you know, stay in touch and make new connections with people that can help their network. Just
For
because,
sure.
you know, I'm also reading a book called Coaching Conversations, and they in the very beginning there's a syndrome AAM, all about me. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, that, if it's like all about whatever it is, but that's just not yourself. I don't want to say selfless, but kind of selfless. Not putting yourself first, but putting
Right.
others first is an important way to
Yeah.
add value.
Yep.
So reeling it back in to a bit more practical and I want to make this a little bit about business too.
Hmm.
Dave, what are some of the challenges that are in business? Eh, you can give me multiple if there's not one that sticks out, but I love to ask the domino question, which is if you could solve one business challenge today, how would that impact your business in the future?
Yeah. I would say there's probably one that I would want to focus on. I'd say our business is really two, right? And it's probably similar for a lot. It's lead generation and consistently doing that, and then finding people, finding good people. The people one is, um, we have some challenges in our industry with that of people not running to come into our field. That's a whole nother conversation of why I'm very passionate about that, but kind of maybe not for this conversation, but the lead gen and getting consistent with that, that's been, I always want more to be better at that. Like that's been the biggest challenge I would say over the last whatever 12, 13 years.
Interesting, you mentioned finding people to break into the accounting field and hiring help. I have experience with private equity, and it's actually a close family friend of mine is a CFO and has his own family office now investing. And
Hmm.
his son sort of took after him, I would say a little bit followed in his footsteps and things like
Hmm.
that. And he goes, the thing I wish I could tell my son's generation, which is like younger millennial, not quite Gen Z, is everyone wants to do finance and everyone wants to get into investing. Everyone wants to do these sell side big deals. But he
Yep.
goes, the real money, it's almost like the white collar equivalent of being a plumber or an electrician. He goes, people could make a killing just doing accounting, getting down to the nuts and bolts of what every
Yeah.
business, it's a function every business needs.
Yep. It's
So
true.
are you finding that the younger generation is less drawn to accounting as much as, older generations?
For sure. 100%. I think there's various reasons for that. I think one is what you mentioned. Like the sexy thing is like finance and private equity and investment banking. Like that's what people want to get into and whatever. Um, Accounting just kind of sounds a little bit like stuffy and older and just not what people want to get into. We've also made it a little challenging to invite people into that with some of the requirements. Like if you want to get your CPA, we've added a bunch of requirements of schooling and testing and things that, again, you want to like having a CPA, you want that to hold weight, of course, but we've made it really challenging to do that. And then just the work environment, especially in public accounting, is you know, and I lived it,
Yeah.
January through April, working, 60, 70 hours a week. And then because of the lack of staffing, then that you get a little break and then it picks back up for the September, October deadlines. And then you're doing year-end planning. And it's like, you know, why would I don't want to work 70 hours a week, right? Like I want to work 40 hours a week. And so I'm not going to go into accounting. I got to go all this extra stuff to get my CPA to really advance in a firm. And I'm going to get crushed with time. Like, why would I want to do that? And so, yeah, there's not as many people going into this thing. Um, and it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out over the next, 3 to 5 years here.
Work culture couldn't be more important for attracting younger talent
100%.
nowadays. I think the
100%.
idea of just show up to work, punch a clock, and if you have negative emotions, just shove them deep down inside. Don't let them ever come out. I think those days of having that work culture are are probably not as going to be prevalent in the future.
Yeah,
And the cultures where when you are intentional about who you bring on as a staff and
yeah,
intentional about who you bring on as a client, and you can find through your brand identity of, here's who we are, what we're all about. That's probably a key differentiator, Dave, for Quantify
yeah.
that these other big firms may not be able to do, but with having the agility and
Right.
a leader like you to attract talent based on culture. That's such a huge. Well,
100%.
I love hearing business owners that share a similar philosophy.
Yeah, yeah.
So I want to ask you before I forget my favorite question, which is the grandfather paradox. And that basically goes like this. Where you're at today, mid 30s,
Hmm.
maybe I'm not going to call you 40. You've got you look like you're in your mid 30s. We'll call it that.
It's
So
getting there, getting close.
you're halfway between your 8-year-old self and you said you have some children. I don't know how old
Yep.
they are, but if you have kids around that age, you know how inquisitive they can be. The world's their oyster, everything's in front of them. And then your
Yep.
80-year-old self, which is, a little bit past the average life expectancy, we'll call it the end of the road.
Hmm.
But if you could have a conversation with each of them from where you're at today, what would you ask them and what would you tell
Man,
them?
that's a great question. I think my 8-year-old self, I would say, you know, figure out what you love to do and do that. Try things like figure out like what are the gifts God's given you, where your passions lie, and go and do that. It like
Mm.
in 2025, I feel like you can do whatever you want to do and make a career and a career out of it. So like figure out what you love to do and do that. And it might take time and it's okay. Like be patient with yourself with that. Um, you might be 25, you might be 30 before you figure that out, but just keep striving and don't be afraid to take a risk to pursue your passion. So I would say, um,
What about the end of the day?
yeah, yeah, that's a
Sometimes a
good,
tougher question.
that is a tougher question. Um, yeah, talking to my older self, I guess my mind goes to like, what's the legacy you left behind? What's the impact you had like on the people around you? I often think about like this idea of like regret,
Mm.
and I don't want to get to the end of my life and have regret on anything. And I believe like our work is a big part of that because that's where we spend a lot of time. Like, did I allocate my time properly? Am I going to regret some of the decisions that I made? Should I have done all of those things or should I have allocated my time somewhere else? So just thinking to the end of my life, like my goal, if I can get to the end of my life without regret, then I'll be okay. Um, but I have to think about that today. I can't think about that when I'm, 40 years from now, because then I can't change what I did. I either have it or I don't. I got to think about that today. So that word regret is something that when I look into the future as I'm older, that's probably the word that pops up the most.
And I think that's a healthy and normal train of thought. Everyone must die at some point. Everyone also has
Right.
to pay taxes. Those are the two
That's true.
absolutes.
Death and taxes. That's
Death
it.
and taxes are the two absolutes, but not everyone gets to fully live out what they think their passion is or their
Yeah,
purpose. So making sure you do the things that you don't just have to do, like die and pay taxes, make sure you spend a lot of time doing things that you are called to do and you're meant to
that's right.
do.
That's
No,
right.
I love that perspective. That's great. Well, Dave, we're approaching the end of the show. I I always love talking to business owners that have taken the leap of faith. Let me ask you one last question before we conclude here. Is what what was the hardest part at the time when you made the transition from being an employee to being a business owner, and what did that difficulty teach you?
The hardest part. I would say the hardest part was building confidence in myself. When you show up every day and you're just getting a paycheck, you kind of know what to expect. When you go out on your own, like there's really nobody there to like affirm you or encourage you that much, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so just building that confidence in myself, like, no, like I can do this. Like I can do this. I'm capable of this. I'm going to do this. And just continue to speak that into existence. Yeah, I would say that's the hardest part. And over time, like I don't know if there's like a magic formula to it. I think it's just that like discipline and persistence. Like if you just continue to get up every day and go after it, things will start to happen. And over time, you'll be like, yeah, you know what? I can do this. Like I've done this for a week now. I could do this. I've done this for a month. I've done this. And all of a sudden you look up and you're like, I've done this for 13 years now. Yeah, I can do this, you know? And you get just the confidence just builds within you. And I just believe it's like that persistence and discipline to just continue to get up and do it. Like if you know that this is what you're supposed to be doing, you just got to keep going.
Absolutely. Nothing helps build confidence more than an empirical stack of evidence that
Yep.
shows what you've already done.
Yep.
It's the pathway going forward. If you have an end goal, it may seem far and distant, but when you take it a step at a time, you can always look back and say, look how far I've come.
That's right. That's right.
Excellent. Well, that concludes today's conversation, Dave. For everyone listening, I don't run ads on the show. I will sometimes shout out organizations like Provisors. That doesn't count. I don't get paid for that.
Sure.
Um, but if you enjoyed this show, uh, it would mean the world to me, anyone listening, to share it with a friend. If you learned something, if you found some value, and if you know somebody in the nonprofit space that needs help with their accounting, absolutely talk to Dave. And Dave, where can people reach you? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah. Our website is thequantifygroup.com. You can look me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there as well. I would say either one of those two. There's a contact page on our website or LinkedIn. Either one of those two is good.
Excellent. Everyone, this is Thunderstock Marketing, bringing you valuable brainstorms. Please do me a favor and be well. Until next time.